another episode of Dissolving Fear. So glad you could be here tonight. We really had some good stuff going today. I did a post on YouTube for the first time and posted that on YouTube. Some of you saw that. Going to be doing a lot more of these things because I think there's a lot more information to share, a lot more things to discuss. And this evening, I'm a little sad this evening. I just read that we have now surpassed the number of the deaths of the coronavirus have now surpassed those who died in 2 decades of war in Vietnam. So in 3 months, we've lost nearly 60,000 people in the United States, and that's tragic, and that's hard, and that makes me sad, and I'm sad. Just gonna name it. It has something to do with the fact that we all need to pay attention to our feelings around this thing. And I know that our emotions are really running ragged right now for a lot of reasons. And I'll speak for myself. I mean, I'm a little out of work. I'm hoping that I can get back into the swing of things, but I'm also looking at these staggering numbers, and you know, I'm kind of upset. I'm upset, and it's not a great feeling. And that's okay though. It's okay because if I'm able to at least admit that and share that, and that's half the battle. It's more than half the battle, rather than just swallowing it and ignoring it and walking off in a rage and being completely self-centered around keeping all that stuff inside. Um, and to a degree, that's what I want to talk about tonight, because I read a beautiful passage this morning, which I often do in my prayer time and my meditation time. I'm always looking to lots of texts to give me some guidance, and I read the story of the sinful woman that comes out of the Gospel of Luke in our New Testament. And interestingly enough, this is the only story. You won't find this story in some of the other Gospels. You won't find it in Mark. You won't find it in Matthew. You won't find it in John. You only find it in Luke. And Luke was one of those disciples that followed Jesus that was more concerned about healing and more concerned about faith. So I'm not gonna read it, but I'm gonna kind of paraphrase what happens. Jesus is invited to a Pharisee's home for dinner, and in those days, this was sort of an open setting in a courtyard that was almost available to the public to a degree. And he's having dinner, and they're discussing obviously lots of things. And a woman from the community who's looked down upon, who is a harlot, comes into the gathering and falls at Jesus' feet, just falls at her feet and his feet, and she is weeping and sobbing, and the Pharisees are just aghast, like, what is going on? Why is this woman here? Why, Jesus, are you even entertaining the idea of letting this woman touch you, let alone tearfully cover you? I mean, they were just um, they were repulsed by the whole experience. And of course, she brings ointment, and she is wiping down his feet. She is loving him, and in a way that the Pharisees just thought was just disgusting, and they knew who she was. And Jesus basically says to this Pharisee, "Look, when I came into your home, you did not wash my feet, and this woman's been washing my feet with her tears. You did not protect my feet with ointment, and yet she has not stopped but rubbing my feet with ointment. She has not stopped taking care of me, and she has bathed me with her love and her care and her concern. So let me ask you a question, um, Mr. Pharisee. Is it who is it that deserves the love of God more? A person who has little to return. If a debt, if there is a debt outstanding, Do you forgive the person who has the bigger debt or the smaller debt? Of course, the Pharisee says, well, yeah, I would love the person who has the bigger debt. I would forgive them more. And Jesus says, well, precisely. This woman who has many sins, she's done many wrong things in her life. And yet she comes in here and takes care of me and shows me her forgiveness and her sense of compassion way more than you. Um, and what do you think our Father in heaven is going to say about people that we forgive and have compassion for, who deserve it more? I mean, who really wins out in the end here? And of course, he kind of puts the Pharisees to shame because all they can think about are their laws and their rules and who's good, who's bad, and who deserves the grace of God, who doesn't. And Jesus is sort of saying, look, man, so you got to throw those rules out. And basically tells the woman, um, your faith in me has saved you. Go on your way. Now, the reason I love that Christ-like story, I just it filled my heart really this morning with such emotion and compassion. And I could just watch the whole thing take place and recognize the self-centered attitude of those who think they know what's going on and think they know what it means to be close to God. And in fact, Jesus puts them to shame. That's what I love about Jesus. He said he's just such an incredible spirit-filled man who is able to look at a situation and see the good in it and see how a person can recover and find redemption in their actions. So, I look at all of this, what's happening in our world today. I think about all these really tens of thousands of people who've died, and I, I, I want to weep. And we're talking hundreds of thousands worldwide. I want to weep. Um, this is tragic. It's hard and it's serious. And as far as I can tell, it's really not going away. And yet we so badly as a culture want to move forward. And believe me, I get that. I understand that. And I don't want to give fear any more handle in my life than this coronavirus has already taken. I don't want to give this any more ammunition. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to get sick. And I don't want to get other people sick. But I also think it's really important that we acknowledge that there's a lot of sadness in this. And the pundits are kicking this thing down the road. The politicians are saying, hey, let's crank up the economy again and not worry so much about this thing. You even got, TV people who are saying, hey, lots of people died from polio and we survived. And I mean, they're using all of these examples of how people die in the context of normal, diseases and human failures. And I'm saying, my God, you guys are missing the point. I mean, this is scary stuff. And as a humanity, we need people to rise up. We need the light people, the light workers to rise up. And we need to really be them ourselves. We need to be them ourselves. Let's not put the burden of this on everybody else that seems to have a presence or seems to have a voice in the popular culture that has some leverage or some influence. Let's be those light workers ourselves, because basically what we're saying is, hey, it's not my job. It's not my job, really, to be a light worker, not to lift people up and not to encourage them to feel sad about all this and help come up with solutions to the problem, which may mean that I need to be the solution of goodness and grace to the people around me and to the culture at large. This is not going to be a few people that lift us out of the doldrums of the realities of this devastating problem. It's going to be all of us doing every little bit we can, small acts, large acts, medium acts of kindness and grace, in order to lift us away and to help us move past this. I mean, so I wanna just emphasize that more than any other time. I mean, that the Pharisees had their own self-centered way of looking at Jesus, and of course, they were the ones who drove him to death. because they couldn't handle the fact that his response was faith and love, and to love God and to bring humanity back into a religion that was essentially dead. Um, what we need to do, and what I would invite us to do, um, is is to is to be a compassionate people and to be in touch with how we feel. Um, I'm I'm especially moved by 58,000 people who died, and I don't know one of them. I don't think, but I am sad by that, and I want to pray about that. So this passage really helped me this morning come to terms with what it means to be thoughtful and kind and loving, especially for those who are really struggling. And I know there are a lot of them out there. So, so let's be aware in our meditation today. And and I'm going to ask you to kind of bow your heads and just center yourselves, and let's get into a little bit of business here. And I ask you to open up your heart. Now, that may be a strange thing to listen to, but really, I want you to try and feel that organ in the upper left-hand quadrant of your chest. And if you're able to calm yourself down, you might even be able to feel the beat, feel the pulse beating through your body. It has its own intelligence. It has its own rhythm. It has its own memory. It has its own strength. It has a purpose and a design that encourages us to be heartfelt. We've kind of ignored that for a long time. And I, having recently done some human anatomy, I'm just amazed at the construct of the heart and how powerful this heart is. It is the first organ that obviously is created um, in human beings. And it is so vital and so important and has a function way beyond just pulsing blood. So open it up and feel it. And feel the power of a Christ-like presence, asking, if not begging us to be available and helpful and kind and prayerful and compassionate. Compassionate towards those who have perished. Compassionate to the families that are struggling with this disease, this virus, its isolating nature, its loneliness, its trauma. Be open and be caring, because we may be healthy, our families may be healthy, our homes may be clean, and we may be following all the guidelines and protecting ourselves, but there are lots of people out there who didn't or couldn't and found themselves compromised by perhaps their own habits and behaviors. But needless to say, their lives have been lost. And I'm painfully aware of that. And it gives me some pain. And I hope that at least it gives you an awareness that whether you're a small leader or a warrior, uh, or somewhere in the middle, whether you're on the front lines or not, you're part of humanity. And you're part of what it means to be empathetic and aware and open and waking up to the reality that, boy, oh boy, this is hard stuff. And when we acknowledge that, when we share that, there's very little we're holding back. And we're inviting God to take our hand and walk us through grief, to walk us through mourning, to walk us through what it means to wake up in the soul. Because our soul is desperately aching to find reality and find warmth and find connection. Sometimes death does that. A lot of times death does that, actually. Where our souls suddenly find that we are touching reality, touching something real, not something topical, not something that's got bullshit written all over it, but something that is real, tangible, emotionally dense, where we are in fact swimming in humanity for a change. We're not in denial. We're not being superficial. We're not being outlandish. We're not being, you know, obnoxious and topical, but deep, deep. Help us, oh God, to be deep. Because that will allow us to find our truth, to find our creativity, to find even our joy amidst hardship, and to find some happiness in that we're actually feeling. it's it's an amazing thing that we have to be sort of struck by tragedy in order to feel. We can also be struck by absolute bliss and joy and know that we have felt and that that can give us a sense of relief as well. So guide us as we absorb you into our lives tonight to help us with our madness, to help us with our anger, to help us with our dismay, to help us with our despair, and to help us with our denial. Oh my God, so much denial among our leadership right now. It just strikes me as being pathetic. But somehow that is asking all of us to rise up and to name change in attitude, and that we are that change. So guide us to be prayerful, guide us to be compassionate, and help us to be connected and ever so aware of what we can do in the lives of others that might make a difference tonight and today. Lead us, O Lord. Help us to be warriors, warriors of faith. And we think of the word warrior and we think of, a Tasmanian devil in a way, tenacious and alive and salivating at the chance to execute vengeance. But really, a warrior is a leader that guides, protects, points, and shows by example how to take care of themselves and others. So bless us this evening, O God, and empower us and lead us to this prayer. Oh God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you would. Relieve me of the bondages of my own self centeredness. that I might better do your will. Take away my difficulties and my resentments and my reluctance, and pour onto me your love, your grace, and your power. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks for being here tonight, for sharing a little bit in my lament, and we'll see you again tomorrow night.